Waiting a few minutes for folks to trickle in here. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight. Right. Katie, I just sent you a text. Great, a lot of familiar faces in the audience here. Wonderful. Good to see you all. Thank you for joining us. We're getting underway in just a minute. We're letting the rest of our guests come on into the webinar. This is a webinar format, so you will not be able to see each other. You will not be able to chat with each other. But we are going to be taking as many questions as possible. If you could submit them in through the Q&A as time permits, we will be addressing those questions for you. And I think everybody's in that was out there. So, welcome. I'm going to start by thanking the folks for joining us tonight. We have many of our wonderful legislators taking time out of their Sundays to join us to give us a little bit of an update on the legislative session. I might say the good, the bad, and the ugly. So we've had some successes and some not so great stuff. And some hope that the few things that are left out there will go in the right direction. So without any further ado, I am going to turn it over to one of my colleagues, and I will tell you, wonderful candidate for Senate 8, Dave Trumbull. Take it away, Dave.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Thanks for being here. It's my pleasure to introduce the moderator for tonight's event. That's Representative Matt Wilhelm, who really needs no introduction, but Representative Wilhelm, along with the leadership team, has led the Democrats this year in the House and kept them united and strong, which has been important because every vote matters this year, and they've been able, working together, to promote a lot of positive legislation and also minimize the reach of some legislation that we might deem not so positive. And I'll just say also that we look forward to, hopefully, in another year, we'll be referring to him as Mr. Speaker. So take it away, Representative Wilhelm.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Dave, for that really kind introduction and for stepping up to run for the state Senate this year. Really looking forward to seeing you out there on the trail in the coming weeks and months, and knocking doors with you in those districts that overlap, those House districts that we also need to win. So really excited about tonight's conversation. Really nice to see so many friends here tonight. It's great to be with all of you, whether you're, wherever you're zooming in from. I can't quite see everyone, but do want to acknowledge the elected state reps from Hillsborough County on tonight's call. And I want to express my gratitude and appreciation to all of you for your commitment this term, and also extend the gratitude of Democrats across Hillsborough County and the entire Granite State. You're going to hear from many of them tonight. I shouldn't say many. You're going to hear from a few of them tonight. And we are looking forward to getting even more elected in just a few months. Look, it shouldn't come as any surprise. This term has had its fair share of challenges. We have a really closely divided chamber, and House Democrats have been fighting every single day for our shared values. We've been standing up against MAGA extremism. We've found common ground wherever it's possible, and we've been laser focused on delivering results for our constituents every step of the way. And so, you know, if you have filed to run for state rep, or you are maybe still thinking about filing to run for the New Hampshire House by the end of this week, a reminder that the final day of the filing period is this Friday. I want to thank you for being here tonight. And if you'd like to learn more about running for state rep, I want to encourage you to reach out to Bev or to Katie or to your town's Democratic committee to learn more. As we gear up for what is no doubt going to be a hard-fought campaign, this seems like the perfect time to remind everyone what House Republicans have been up to over the last 16 months. When we think back to Organization Day, which honestly feels like such a long time ago, but Republicans attempted to steal an election on the House floor to add to their razor-thin majority. And thankfully, House Democrats stuck together. We forced a special election to resolve the tie, and we were victorious 3 months later as Representative Chuck Grassley decisively won a special election in Rochester. Later that winter, you may remember Republican State Rep Jeffrey Greason was arrested for assault. He was caught on tape getting into a verbal and physical altercation with a snowplow driver. And then came the curious case of Benjamin Bartlett, a Republican state rep from Nottingham, who resigned after it was revealed that he violated the Hatch Act by running for state rep while he was working as a federal employee. Over the summer, last summer, we learned that former State Senator Andy Sanborn, who is now heading to court for stealing COVID relief funds and using them to purchase a Ferrari for himself and for his wife, Republican House Speaker Pro Tem Lori Sanborn of Bedford. And then how could we forget? There was Troy Murner of Lancaster, who moved out of his district, used his business address to establish domicile, and then illegally voted at town meeting. He resigned only after it became clear that the AG was going to press charges. And then this spring, we learned about the dark past of Representative John Stone of Claremont, who fought for years to keep the details of his termination as a police officer from being released. And now we know why. His unspeakable threats of violence are just an absolute betrayal of public trust. We called for the Speaker to remove Stone from the House Criminal Justice and Public Safety Committee, but the Speaker refused. And that has really become a pattern. Time and time again, House Republican leadership has had opportunities to do the right thing, but at every turn, they've been unable or at least unwilling to do so. And that is why we must elect a Democratic House majority and bring new leadership to Concord. And with your help, I am confident that we're going to be able to get it done. But it's not just the character of the House Republican caucus, it's also their problematic policy agenda that threatens to take our state backwards. Over the last 2 years, the House GOP has prioritized a barrage of more than 24 anti-LGBTQ+ bills. They've pushed expanded abortion bans ranging from 15 weeks to just 15 days. These folks are obsessed with power and control. They are focused on culture wars. They're focused on conspiracy theories, from book bans to chemtrails. They even forced the Speaker to establish a special committee on the truth about COVID-19. You just can't make this stuff up. Earlier this spring, a Republican state rep spoke on the House floor to defend child marriage, referring to underage girls as ripe and fertile. And a couple weeks back, you may have heard that a fight nearly broke out between two Republican state reps on the floor following a debate on common sense gun safety legislation. In contrast, House Democrats, you're going to hear from them tonight, but Democrats in both the House and the Senate focusing on bringing people to families, from lowering costs and expanding opportunity to protecting the rights and freedoms of all Granite Staters. Last year, we worked with our friends in the Senate to strike a bipartisan compromise budget deal that increased investments in affordable housing, in childcare, in healthcare, and in public education. And it locks in long overdue pay raises for our hardworking state employees. House Democrats pushed the Speaker to establish special committees on housing and childcare. We've moved the debate forward on critical workforce issues that impact both hardworking families as well as employers across every single industry across the state. And then this year, Democrats in Concord worked on a bipartisan basis to make fixes to our bail reform law, which will become They'll come up for a vote this Thursday, so you can keep your eye on that. And we're closer than ever to legalizing and regulating adult use cannabis, another issue that will come up for a final vote this week. Democrats have been leading the charge to pass legislation to require health insurance providers to cover breast cancer screenings, to keep PFAS out of our landfills. We'll hear more about that tonight. And a farm-to-school pilot program that provides students with access to healthy farm-fresh food in our public schools. And speaking of our schools, we're going to hear from Senator Fenton here in a bit. He's going to talk about the fight for transparency and oversight to Frank Edelbluth's reckless and misguided school voucher scheme, and to keep him from lowering the minimum standards in our public schools. We're going to hear from Senator Chandley about the efforts to codify abortion rights to ensure that access to mifepristone and IVF are available to every Granite Stater, and to protect voting rights. We're gonna hear from Senator Soucy on that, and the efforts to strengthen our democracy. We're gonna hear from Representative McGhee, who's gonna talk about the ideas that are gonna move us into a clean energy future and the reluctance on the other side of the aisle to take action. But, you know, regardless of the issue, we've got leaders who are working night and day on the stuff that really matters. Democrats have been fighting for hardworking Granite Staters every single day. We've defeated that so-called right to work bill that we see every couple of years. We've been working to restore retirement benefits for police and firefighters who put their lives on the line for us every single day. And as I mentioned earlier, we are going to continue to defend the dignity and basic humanity of all LGBTQ+ people of all ages, so they can be who they are, they can love who they love, and be fully embraced in every corner of our live free or die state. And while, you know, certainly we feel it, the progress can feel really slow at times. The wins right now are sort of few and far between, but I'm confident, more confident than ever, that we're going to flip the House in November. And that path to the majority runs right through Hillsborough County. The New Hampshire House Democratic Victory Campaign Committee, which is led by Chairwoman Laura Talerski of Nashua, Deputy House Democratic Leader Alexis Simpson, and our Executive Director, Jonathan George, who I know many of you know. We are all fired up. We are ready to go. We're working with local committees across the state, including and especially here in Hillsborough County, to recruit literally hundreds of candidates who share our values and are ready to knock our way to a Democratic majority this fall. Just 11 votes across 3 seats decided the House majority last cycle, but 2024 is the year that we are going to finish the job and get our state back on track. Hillsborough County Democrats, you all know this is an all hands on deck moment for our democracy. So I'm hoping that you're as ready as I am to get to work, to put in the work to reelect Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, to reelect Chris Pappas, send a Democrat to replace the irreplaceable Annie Kuster in Capitol Hill, to make sure that we have a pro-choice Democrat in the corner office, and elect Democratic majorities to the House, the Senate, and the Executive Council. I cannot wait to be knocking doors with all of you this summer and fall to make it happen. That's why you'll see me and Alexis and Laura and Jonathan and our entire team out there over the next 5 months, organizing, phone banking, and knocking our way to victory. So I'm excited about tonight's lineup of some of my favorite legislative colleagues from across Hillsborough County who are going to share more about their individual work and our collective work as Democrats this term at the State House. And to kick us off, I am going to turn things over to my partner in leadership in Concord, Senate Democratic Leader Donna Soucy, who represents Manchester Wards 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, as well as Litchfield. She serves on the Commerce Committee, as well as the Election Law and Municipal Affairs Committee. Tonight, she's going to talk with us about preserving and protecting and expanding voting rights. So just want to note, if you have questions as we go, drop them in the chat. We have a tight schedule and we'll get to questions as we're able, but we'll be also just moving things along to make sure that we stay on schedule. So Donna, the floor is yours.
Well, thanks so much, Matt. Great to see everyone tonight. I know there are a bunch of you on. I would just echo the comments of Leader Wilhelm that Hillsborough County is the center of the universe right now. It's where we're going to reclaim our majorities. I see my great colleague Shannon Chandley, and I want to thank David Trumbull for stepping up to run. We have 2 wonderful challengers and Matt McLaughlin and Ben Bing that are super exciting. They've already started knocking doors and are doing great work. But I'm here tonight to tell you a little bit about the work we've been doing in Concord over the last year, particularly with respect to election law. Look, there's some good, some bad, some ugly. And I just want to give you a flavor of some of the important work that we've done. Some of the sort of challenging work that fortunately didn't get through. Some things like an election, well, I shouldn't say fortunately didn't get through. I'll get to the fortunately didn't get through. So let me talk about some of the good things that we have worked on. We did do a ton of work, both the House and Senate, trying to create an election portal to ensure that people would have easier access statewide at their own convenience to be able to register to vote or to make changes. We came precipitously close. We got to a committee of conference, and unfortunately, in the end, that didn't happen. On a positive note regarding those changes, though, when that issue came before our committee in election law in the Senate, I asked the Secretary of State specifically if he could initiate some of these changes himself to create that ease for people to register and to also make name changes. And at that time, he did commit that he could, in fact, do some of that without the enactment of legislation. So I'm going to continue to push him, as I know some of my colleagues are, because making sure that people have access to registration early in preparation for heading to the polls is going to be particularly critical in this presidential cycle. Speaking of the presidential election, Republicans did try to pass a constitutional amendment to make the New Hampshire first in the nation primary part of our Constitution. That did fail to reach the majority. And in a way, I think that's a good thing, because I don't think we need to enshrine something like a date in the Constitution. The Constitution is for our fundamental rights. And there is no question, given what happened during our presidential primary, that our first in the nation status is already enshrined in statute. And that certainly was what protected our status and allowed us to have the primary that we did and do the Right in Joe Biden movement that we did. There were several bills, both House bills and Senate bills, to change the date of our state primary, though. And although none of them were successful, I think it's something that you're going to see us bring back very quickly. The consensus seems to be around August. We have one of the latest primaries in the country. That's a problem potentially for those casting ballots overseas and for our military voters. So although we were not successful, we are going to continue to pursue that. And I think you're going to see a change hopefully next year with our Democratic majorities very early on. Also, ranked choice voting, an issue that comes up and I know people are interested in, that was not successful. On absentee ballots, I once again sponsored my no excuse absentee, which did come up short in the Senate, but that's something that we're also going to continue to work on. We did a ton of work. My House colleagues spent a lot of time last summer working on campaign contributions and expenditures and reporting. That legislation, fortunately, was successful, and we're going to be voting on that this Thursday. So we will have a much more transparent and cohesive process. And we also have some good stuff going to the governor. A few bills that will allow clerks to deliver ballots to nursing homes with a little more accountability, making sure that those ballots are properly handled. We have some other bills dealing with meetings of voters, supervisors of the checklist and when they come in. But I do really want to highlight one fabulous bill going to the governor, and that was a bill sponsored by Representative Angela Brennan, House Bill 1569, which was a bill that would, 1596, which is a bill that will prohibit deceptive AI usage in political advertising. Now, as you know, that was used during the primary, and there was an AI created of President Biden. This bill will be in place for this election cycle so that anyone trying to create deep fakes will in fact be prosecuted and have the full force of state law behind them. Two really scary bills, though, that I want to mention in particular. House Bill 1569, which is going to the governor. This was a bill sponsored by Representative Robert Lynn, former Supreme Court Justice, and this bill would eliminate the use of affidavits. So people would have a much more difficult time registering at the polls. The bill is virtually unworkable. Just about anyone with any legal background or election law experience will tell you that. But the Senate election law chair, Jim Gray, thought he was being cute, didn't amend the bill, sent it off with the support of only Senate Republicans to the governor. It's anticipated the governor will veto that. But the real problem is that another bill, very similar, House Bill 1370, would also eliminate the use of affidavits to prove who you are in order to register and cast your ballot. Many, many critical issues in this bill are just as unworkable. In some ways, I think even more unworkable. This bill would create a statewide call-in center. Unclear how the Secretary of State is going to accomplish this. It would allow for poll workers doing registration around the state to call into this one group and access information that is available electronically about whether or not someone has a license, birth certificate, any information they can access to try to get proof that this person is who they say they are and to register them to vote. There's a 20-minute maximum time limit. If somebody is not able to obtain information necessary as required by this bill to get their registration through, they will then be given what's basically called a provisional ballot, which is something that's not ever been done in New Hampshire before. This ballot would have a unique identifier. All ballots cast that had this unique identifier would then be collected at the end of the election and submitted to the Secretary of State. Secretary of State would then submit them to the judicial branch, who would have to rule on these ballots individually by the time that the deadline for recounts occurs. How all of this is going to work, how all of this benefits our already great electoral system is just unknown at this point. House Bill 1370 was in a committee of conference. What I described to you is the report. That's going to be voted on Thursday of this week. The Senate will likely act upon it to pass it. I'll leave it to my good House colleagues to hopefully see the light and try to defeat it. But that's really some of what we're up against. And they're trying to make this effective for this current election, which is really frightening and which really leads me to believe that the Republicans are running scared because they know that we have the advantage. So that's the highlights. That's not all of the bills, but those are some of the more important ones. Other than one last that I will mention, we finally were able to enact House Bill 1264, which will provide accessible voting systems, but at the municipal level, not just state and presidential. So that will be an important addition, and always want to end on a good note. So thank you all for being on this call on a wonderful Sunday night, and I'll throw it back over to our moderator, Matt Wilhelm.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Donna. Appreciate the recap of the highlights, but also some lowlights and some unfinished business here in the final week. So we'll see what happens, and I know everybody will be watching closely. Next up is State Senator Shannon Chandley, who represents Amherst, Merrimack, Milford, and Wilton, and serves on the Senate Commerce and Judiciary Committees. And on the Judiciary Committee, she is a tireless advocate for abortion rights and reproductive freedom for all Granite Staters. And that's what she's going to tell us about tonight. So Shannon, please take it away.
Thank you very much, Matt. And thank you to everyone for being here tonight. I think it's great testament to the energy in Hillsborough County that we are doing this tonight. It's been a very long legislative session and summer awaits, and yet here we all are gathered to talk about what has transpired and what we're looking forward to doing in the future. So thank you everyone for being here. As Matt said, I serve on the Judiciary Committee and the Commerce Committee. And Judiciary Committee in the Senate this year had hundreds during this past session, the two from 23 and 24, tremendous number of bills. Many of them were good bills and many of them passed. In the not so good area were the bills that we had regarding reproductive freedom and abortion rights. The good bills, the ones that we were trying to pass that would in fact enshrine a woman's right to privacy in her healthcare decision-making, were rejected by our Republican colleagues. The House did some very good work because the House killed a number of bills that would have restricted abortion rights even more. So they never made their way to the Senate. I just want to mention that 27 years ago this weekend, in 1997, then Governor Shaheen signed into law SB 34, which repealed the criminal prohibitions against abortion. That was 97, so it wasn't that long ago, 27 years, but it was a broadly bipartisan bill. SB 34 had a number of senators and House members, Democrats and Republicans. It passed both chambers. It was signed by the governor. And when I entered into legislative politics in the state of New Hampshire, I did not foresee this as being an issue we would be dealing with the way we currently are. I really thought in our live free or die state, this issue, the issue of privacy in medical decision-making was decided, that we would not be battling this the way we are. Now, every year, some folks would put in bills and they would not get a lot of traction and they'd be disposed of. Now we are fighting tooth and nail to make sure women in the state of New Hampshire have access to abortion, and that people, pregnant people from all over the country who come to the state of New Hampshire have access to abortion and do not have to fear that they will be reported for having done so in our state. These are real threats. We know that at the national level, Congress just refused, the Republicans blocked in the Senate. They all voted against women having a right to contraception. How scary is that for all of us? We need to make sure that here in New Hampshire, we are protecting access to contraception, access to reproductive health care, and access to abortion, safe and legal abortion. I want to mention, and sometimes some of these issues come up in different ways. We know that we had a number of bills that had to do with in vitro, we had a bill that had to do with care for same-sex couples seeking in vitro coverage. And the arguments that come up against it can be chilling. Now, the Senate did pass it, the House did not. They didn't see fit to pass this time, but we'll keep working to ensure equity for same-sex couples as well as heterosexual couples experiencing infertility. One of the bills that I think was most interesting that I believed we had the best chance of passing was SB 461, which was Senator Rosenwald's bill that would have removed the construction clause from the Fetal Life Protection Act. That is the clause that said, nothing in this act shall be construed to create a right to abortion. And so the bill that Senator Rosenwald put forward said, simply eliminate that line. It did not. We had arguments from our colleagues that abortion is legal in New Hampshire. What is the problem with letting that line remain? And of course, having that line in our law is not an affirmative right, and it suggests, in fact, that there may not be an affirmative right. That bill, we struggled to get passed. Eventually, it was amended in a way that sadly none of the Democrats could vote for, because it was amended to include some very dangerous data collection. Data collection on any medical issue can be important. There are times it's appropriate, but we always have to balance that against privacy and the danger of infringing upon our privacy rights. This bill did pass the Senate on a partisan basis, went to the House, and again, I will thank the House for ITLing that bill. We'll continue to face these challenges in the upcoming year, but we know that folks in the state of New Hampshire support a woman's right to abortion access. We know that we are doing what the people of New Hampshire want. And I'm going to say that we need to make sure that our voters understand the threats that exist right now. I'm happy to take questions and talk about more after we hear from everybody, but thank you so much for listening to me now, and I look forward to working with each and every one of you in the next several months.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Shannon. Really, really appreciate that rundown. I'm excited that our next speaker just hopped on the call. He is on bedtime duty tonight. He is a dad of no longer 2, now 3. And he was my seatmate in my first term in the House. You know, I used to be able to say that we're each proud parents of 2 kids, but over the weekend, Donovan Fenton became the proud dad of a 3rd kiddo. We've been texting, but excited to be able to congratulate you here tonight in person, at least via Zoom. If we're lucky, maybe he'll share some baby photos before he hops off. But in the state Senate, Donovan represents Keene, a bunch of towns in Cheshire County. And then I was like, why is Donovan even here? I think he's got 1 town in Hillsborough County, Hancock. Is that right?
Hancock, Peterborough.
Oh, Peterborough too. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is Roxbury in Hillsborough?
What town?
Is Roxbury?
No.
I think so.
No. Okay. Well, I got 2 then. 2 of the best
Okay.
ones.
You got 2. So that's great. So he is one of our incredible members of the Hillsborough County Senate delegation. He serves on the Transportation and Education committees. And tonight he's going to tell us about the fight to preserve and protect public education here in New Hampshire. So Donovan, over to you, my friend.
Well, thank you, Matt. I appreciate that. And, you know, if I have dark circles under my eyes, I apologize, folks. Like Matt said, we just welcomed our 3rd baby, Emmeline, last Thursday night, and she was about 4 days past due. So we were anxiously awaiting her, and it's been really fun so far. I have a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old right now, so there's always a lot going on. But to get down to business, Matt, thank you for that introduction. I represent District 10 in the Senate, which Matt said is in Hillsborough. It's Peterborough and Hancock, but mostly it's the Monadnock region, which is like Keene, Chesterfield, Walpole, you know, kind of the southwestern corner of our state. And I have been on education, the Senate education, for about 2 years now. And it's been a very busy 2 years in education. You know, I'm sure you've all seen nationally, we are seeing this attack on public education, and it's no different in New Hampshire. Republicans really want to dismantle public education, and that's really what we saw this session. One of my colleagues put it best, it's a death by 1,000 cuts, what's going on in public education. And we had 113 bills this session in just education, which was a lot. So I'm going to get into funding, because that's something we talk about a lot. That's the big elephant in the room, no pun intended, is the EFA accounts. And if you're not familiar with what that stands for, it's Education Freedom Accounts, and it gives parents money to send their children to private or religious schools. And, you know, why is that bad? Well, it uses our taxpayer money for payment to start. So everyone on this call, everyone in New Hampshire, your money goes to this program. And the cost has ballooned. I think it was originally started at it was sold as a $115,000 program for low-income individuals, and it's ballooned to over $60 million, which is insane. And there's no guardrails on this program or accountability of income for parents whatsoever. And one of the main fights we had this year was to raise that threshold of income requirements for parents to 500% of the federal poverty level. So you would be making $130,000 a year to be in this program. And what most recently happened was the Senate had a version to raise it to 400. The House had a version to raise it to 500. And the committees of conference just met this past week. And I think they settled on 425, which is about 120,000, or maybe it was 450% of the federal poverty, which is about $120,000 a year for a family. EFAs continue to be a struggle, and every time we try and put some sort of guardrails on the program, it gets shot down. And we are in the minority, and what we're just trying to look for is accountability. That's what it's fiscal responsibility from a party that prides itself on being business oriented and fiscally responsible. This is the most fiscally irresponsible program there is. And something else we dealt with as well, I'm not sure, I'm in education, so I don't know if anyone was touching these subjects, but we had the Parental Bill of Rights, which is the Don't Say Gay bill. The rights that this claims to cover for parents, for the most part, is already rights that exist in statute, rights that schools are already aware of, and rights that any parent in the state of New Hampshire is able to access. And a glaring exception to that is the addition of reporting requirements on students regarding their gender identity. We had a bill that in Senate Education that said, if the bus driver overheard your son might be gay, or that your son kissed another boy, he would have to report it to the parents, the bus driver. Same with the janitor. It was absolutely insane. And, we were able to call out Republicans on this. The Parental Bill of Rights bill did die last session, which was a really good thing. But, some of these anti-transgender bills, these anti-LGBTQ plus bills are still making it through. And singling out these transgender students to be specifically surveilled and reported on by their teachers, those students would have their rights violated. And it's just the hypocrisy of it all is ridiculous. And we're really looking at dismantling of the public education. And another bill we dealt with was part-time teachers. So this bill would allow schools to hire part-time teachers without certification. So it was House Bill 1298, and it would allow teachers working fewer than 30 hours a week who pass a criminal background check to be hired and teach without a credential. Now, it sounds okay on the surface, but essentially, anybody could walk into a school. In my daytime job, I'm a car salesman. So I could say, hey, I'm really good at selling. I think I should teach one of your classes. I have no experience whatsoever teaching, but through this program, I could be hired. And, it's an indefinite program as well. So you will never have to be teacher certified. You can just keep rolling over into this program. Right now we desperately need teachers, but this is the absolute wrong way about going about it. You wouldn't go to your dentist and expect someone who just wants to do your root canal. You want them to be trained, and that's what we're looking at with this program, is that there's no training of how to handle students, behavior, things like that. It's just that, you're good with computers, you could teach our IT class. And unfortunately, that did pass as well. There's a lot of unfortunately passes that I'm talking about, but that did go to the committee of conference, so the House will have another shot at that. SB 341, relative to mandating disclosures by school district employees to parents. This was another nasty bill, back into the gender identity issue. If you mention the word gender, you have to notify parents 2 weeks in advance. And this is really geared at hurting our LGBTQ plus community. So essentially, if you mention anything about heterosexuality, homosexuality, any sort of gender, you have to notify parents 2 weeks in advance. And it doesn't make sense, because if you mention anything dealing with sexuality, the language in the bill says you have to notify as well. So if you say Mr. Smith, you need to notify the parents. But the true purpose of this bill really is to go after our LGBTQ plus community. All right, so I know I'm running out of time. I'll do some good news. There is some good news. I'm sure a lot of you know this, though. The U.S. District Court in New Hampshire struck down the 2021 law, which was the Divisive Concepts Law. This is really big. This is putting bounties on teachers for teaching basic things like race, gender, sexual orientation. And this law also allowed parents to bring complaints against these teachers and schools and staff who they believe violated the law. Another great bill was my loan repayment bill. I'm going to toot my own horn for a second. This bill would help teachers repay their loans in these rural school districts. And this is a fantastic bill. We just got it through a committee of conference. It goes back to the House, which I'm hoping for a great vote. But I've never driven by a school and seen teacher wanted signs on the side of the street near the schools, and it's a really big problem where we can't afford to pay these teachers more, so we need to find different avenues in order to help them. And the good news is, this bill did pass. It has a whopping $1 in it, but we're hoping to fund it this coming year. And there's a lot of good bipartisan things we worked on as well. The budget actually allocated more money for public schools this past legislative session. But overall, it's been tough in education. Being in the majority is really going to help us next year. And I'm happy to take any questions if you guys have any.
All right, Donovan may have to jet here pretty soon. So if you've got questions, drop them in the Q&A. If you have any questions for any of our previous panelists, throw them in there too. But seeing none, we're going to keep things going. Donovan, thanks for the recap. And again, congratulations on your new arrival.
Thank you, guys. I am going to jet because I can put some babies to sleep.
Yeah, seriously.
Thank you, guys.
Take care. Good night. Next up is Representative Kat McGhee, who represents the town of Hollis in the State House. I saw on social media over the weekend that Kat just filed for re-election, which is great news, not only for our caucus and for her constituents, but for all of us who know how desperately New Hampshire needs to move to a clean energy future. Kat serves as our ranking member on the House Science, Technology, and Energy Committee. They use really big words and talk about really complicated subjects. And Kat has a grasp on these complex issues, unlike anybody else in our caucus. And I'm just thrilled that she's here to break it down for us and not make us feel dumb about it. So Kat, over to you.
Wow.
Please don't make us feel dumb. That's always my fear.
Thank you, Matt. That's a lovely introduction. I would never. I think Wendy is on ST&E with me, and she can attest that we have fun on our committee, even though some of the bills are relatively complex. And that's kind of where I wanted to start with people, because in listening to Donovan and Shannon and people that have spoken already, the overall thing that I see happening is that we are losing ground in a number of areas, number of sectors of our economy, and also capacities that we have in our social structure, right? If our schools are being attacked, then we're losing teachers, infrastructure is going. And the energy sector is no different. We've had several years of Republican rule now. I've been 3 terms on ST&E, Science, Technology, and Energy Committee in the House. And what we've seen is when I first started paying attention, I actually thought you had to know a lot of things going in to be on this committee, right? So I, like most women, I went and did all my homework and listened to all the people that were working in the prior administrations and started to read things like the state energy policy. All of that stuff has been kind of thrown by the wayside in the last few years. And so it's been really hard for us on the committee. I think that folks who are re-upping to run again, a lot of them are doing that against, demoralized background where we've seen a lot of good bills get axed, and good ideas get axed, and bad bills get moved forward. So as Matt said at the beginning, part of our job in the House has been to be a firewall and to try and make sure we stop, really the worst things. So I'm going to explain a little bit to you. I have slides, but I'm not going to put them up since we're all just talking. So I'll just tell you a couple of things. We had several bills that we wanted to pass going into session. We didn't have as many bills as we usually do because the ST&E Democrats had a lot of ITLs on our bill ideas the prior year, and we were not able to bring them back again. So, but we had a cash on the hoods program for EV vehicles. Rebecca McWilliams' bill was a good bill. It was ITL'd in the House. There was also a proxy carbon pricing bill that would ask government agencies to include the cost of using fossil fuels in different aspects of state projects that were being undertaken. It was a really good bill. That was Nick Germana's bill. And so it was heard in Commerce. It wasn't heard in ST&E, so it was kind of surprising. But that would have been a good bill that was also ITL'd. So we see these things that are sort of progressive, and they're more strategic, and they would, help us to lower emissions more rapidly. And those types of bills just ideologically are kind of knocked down by the Republicans pretty quickly. We did have a couple of bills that we succeeded in on the same list of bills that we wanted to pass. One of them was reinstating integrated resource planning. Again, those are the words that Matt's talking about. But the utilities basically have to go in front of the Public Utilities Commission, and they have to say that they're looking long-term, right? So whether it's infrastructure or other aspects of renewable energy, cleaning up their portfolio, whatever, they have to put in a plan every 5 years. And the Republicans had removed the language on that planning last year with an agreement in a committee of conference that they would reinstate the language. So this was a really important bill, and we got that through. And then also Leader Wilhelm's bill, HB 1499, for a New Hampshire Civilian Clean Energy Conservation and Resilience Corps. That was a bill. He had another version of that he tried to get through before. This year it succeeded. So we were really happy to see that go through. And basically, this is what I'm talking about. When you think of energy, there are many aspects to energy. One of the things that we're failing at is because our policies have been so unwelcoming to new energy technologies and cleaner energy technologies, we don't have the workforce. So the idea of having a program like this where you can grab youth, engage youth, let them understand what the options are, and get them integrated in the state, it's only going to help us, because those people are going to want to stay here if we can house them, and hopefully help us with those clean energy jobs. And then we had a bill that was put in for the Community Power Coalition, which many of us are familiar with because they've been growing by leaps and bounds with the towns that they're signing up, cities and towns. And they're basically a nonprofit that came in to supply competition in the energy supply market. So their objective, though, as a nonprofit, is to also help us clean up our energy supply more rapidly. One of the ways they want to do that is they want to secure some of their energy from group hosts, right? So that's people who have larger facilities above 1 megawatt, below 5 megawatts. So the sweet spot for investment. They're going to try and get that finally going, because Sununu has been really holding that back for the whole 8 years he's been in by saying he's worried there's going to be cost shifting. Well, with this new group, Community Power Coalition, they basically will prevent any cost shifting in the utility rate customers, because I know this is getting into the weeds now. That's not what I mean to do, but because they will be paying any net metered, credits that go to their customers. So it would be a really good thing if we had given them what they wanted this year. What ended up happening with HB 1600 is they came to us and said, hey, this relationship with us buying from people who are producing locally wasn't really covered in the statutory language. So we'd like to add that language. And at the last second, the Department of Energy came in and said, we don't understand this and it may have unintended consequences. So they gutted the part of the bill that would have been helpful. So, and that happens a lot. That's the demoralizing thing I was talking about. So they didn't get what they needed. And basically what we're doing is we're enabling them, saying we like competition, and then we're hobbling them, like we're kneecapping them by not letting them have what they need in order to grow sufficiently to make that competition really help us bring prices down. So, so what we need is new leadership who actually understand what they're doing. And then I had a list of bills to stop. There was one bill that was trying to recalculate the formulas to lower the amount of money that we put into New Hampshire Saves. That's our energy efficiency and weatherization program. It's a 4-to-1 return on investment. It is a no-brainer for us to be doing the New Hampshire Saves program, but they've been doing nothing but trying to, again, kneecap it. So that was killed in the Senate. So they sent it to interim study. There was a bill to legalize opting out of having any public utility service. Luckily, we killed that in the House. There was the chemtrails bill with cloud seeding, another cray prohibition bill. And none of the people that came to testify in our committee could answer for us what their evidence was. They said, just look up. So we're like, we're the science committee. We can't do that. So, and then one of the most dangerous bills in our estimation was HB 1623. This was the chair of my committee's pet project. He was desperately pushing to rewrite the state energy policy in his own image, which was basically saying we need fossil fuels. So it was, we were trying to stop this from the get-go. There was a portion of the bill that talked about if a power plant was involuntarily being closed. So basically they're worried about the government coming in and saying, hey, those fossil fuel plants need to be phased out. And so they said, well, that would present a problem and a danger to people. So we want to protect those plants. We ended up allowing him to put some very vague language that really isn't enforceable in there about being able to have DOE research it if a plant gets told they have to close and they don't want to. And we don't think that will ever happen either. But we did get them to take out rewriting the state energy policy because they were taking out excellent language that everyone's agreed to and trying to replace it with stuff that was really nonsensical for a state to have as energy policy. And then we also had a bill that asked us to pause forest carbon credits for 2 years. And what that was that came from the North Country, where there'd been a large land sale in Pittsburgh. The land had always had credits on it, but it was being harvested, and local taxes were benefiting the towns from that harvesting. And the new owners didn't want to do as much harvesting; they wanted to just reap the credits. So folks were pretty upset about that. And we worked on that bill significantly and turned it around into something that actually benefits the state, where we're actually chronicling who's got these kinds of deals for carbon credits. And so that we can learn some more about how to adjust those and how to make sure that people aren't losing necessary taxes in places that really rely on it when somebody goes into purchasing large tracts of land so that they can make money on it by allowing the trees to sequester carbon. And then there were a couple of other really good things that got done with Senate energy bills. We passed SB 391, which was streamlining grid interconnection processes. Interconnection processes are what hold up large scale renewable energy projects because they have to plug into the grid in order to be useful. And so there's a logjam there that isn't working. And so this bill was aiming to try and fix that. We also have a thing called the Site Evaluation Committee, which some folks on here who may be involved in energy and environmental stuff may be familiar with. Existing power plants, many of them in the state, are trying to reinvent themselves now because the federal government is providing all kinds of money to help with the transition. And a couple of those plants announced that they're going to be going out of business for coal. Schiller and in Bow, right? They both announced earlier this year. But they came to us and they said, if an existing power plant has already been approved, there should be a fast track. So we had to go through figuring out all that, and we passed that bill. That was SB 451. And then one of the aims of Senator Waters, I know this year, was he had SB 543, which was to set up an environmental resilience council. So when you call anything climate related, it just is a no-go with Republicans. So because we had so much climate induced weather damage last year with culverts and flooding, he presented the bill with language that said we should have a council that's dedicated to figuring out how to make the state more resilient as weather changes become more intense. So that got passed into law and that's already been signed. So yeah, so that's the list that I had there. And I the last caveat I will say about energy policy in New Hampshire is that the Democrats on House Science, Technology, and Energy understand that we have not been strategic in a number of years and that we have to play catch up, similar to what happened in Michigan when Democrats took over and similar to what happened in Maine when Mills took over from LePage. You know, the idea is we should have a suite of bills ready for that next Democratic governor. And that's what we're working to do over the summer. So we're working with some of our stakeholders and we're starting to be more strategic, because these bills have all been scattershot, right? We think of something, we try to get something on it, but we're not working in a very strategic way. And with the energy sector, we really could be doing a lot better. We have a lot of things to solve for, and that's really, I'm hoping that people will understand that they're not going to get any of those things unless they vote in Democratic majorities.
Democratic majorities and a Democratic governor, and then we're playing catch up. That's what we got to do. So thank you for your leadership, Kat. Really appreciate the rundown. We are going to keep chugging along here. Next up, we've got Representative Peter Petrigno, who represents Milford in the New Hampshire House. Peter is a retired public school teacher. And in addition to his work on the Children and Family Law Committee, he has really championed the effort to repeal the divisive concepts ban, that, you know, the muzzling of our teachers, keeping them from teaching the real history of racism and sexism in America. And as Senator Fenton said earlier, a couple weeks back, we all celebrated the news of this ruling that struck down the Republicans' divisive concepts ban. And I know we'll all be following it really closely as the state considers its appeal and we figure out what's next. But Peter, thank you for your leadership on this issue. And for taking some time tonight to talk through the work of children and family issues in the State House this term.
Well, thank you very much, Matt. And I'm very happy to be here. Thanks so much for the invitation. In children and family law this year, we had 50 bills referred to us, 14 of which have already passed. 3 right now are in committee of conference. 2 of them are extremely important. Senate Bill 417 and House Bill 1573 were all about revising the criteria for out-of-home placement of children under the Protection Act. You may recall that this past summer, our child advocate, Cassandra Sanchez, went to the Bledsoe's Youth Academy down in Tennessee to visit 2 New Hampshire boys who were placed there. And what she found was horrific. She reported that there was a significant amount of unethical treatment of our boys. They were traumatized there rather than receiving treatment. So these 2 bills would, in addition to appropriations, updating licensing, certification, inspection, surprise inspections, but also we're talking about when we place these children to have priority given to them being placed, if possible, with siblings and also within proximity to their existing community, basically trying to keep them in New Hampshire rather than out of state, if at all possible. So we're waiting to see what's happening with those 2 bills in committee of conference. I spoke to one of the members who believes they're going to be coming out favorably, so we're looking forward to that on Thursday. One we are quite excited about is the marriage, raising the age of marriage to 18. This was Senate Bill 359. Representative Cassandra Levesque, one of our younger members, has been trying since she joined the legislature back in 2019 to get this passed. And year after year after year in the House Republicans have been successful in beating it back. Why? I honestly don't know. But this year, a different tactic. Senator Deborah Altschler, who previously in the House was a member of Children and Family Law, introduced it into the Senate, where it was no issue and it passed. You know, I believe unanimously, which really took the winds out of the sails of House Republicans because it came from the Senate, I think on their consent calendar. And there was a little bit of a floor fight, some holdouts on the Republican side, but happily, we finally were able to get that passed, and I'm looking forward to being there when the governor signs that. Hopefully he will. We have to wait and see, but a great victory there. Regarding parental rights, we had 2 proposed constitutional amendments come to us. CACR 25. In it spoke about the parental right to control their children. The word control appeared a number of times. We didn't think that was a very good idea and recommended that not to pass, and it was put on the consent calendar. But another similar parental bill of rights, CACR 17, it was basically a restatement of rights that already exist in federal law, state law, and it's been reaffirmed time and time again in the courts. I spoke against it on the floor. I really believe it's nothing more than a political ploy by Republicans. They want to present themselves as the champions of parental rights, but I really believe it's a disservice to the constituents. It's leading them to believe that they don't have rights, and somehow Republicans are going to champion rights that these parents don't know they already have. So it did fail to get the 3/5 requirement, but the vote predictably was partisan. So there we have it on parental rights. Another interesting bill that came to us in Children and Family Law was House Bill 1308 concerning libraries. We know about the efforts to ban books. Well, I guess if books can't be banned, this legislation would allow parents to have access to their children's library records. So basically a parent could go in and say, hey, what books are my kids taking out of the library? Rather than having an open and honest relationship with their kids, parents want to spy on their kids. Realistically, it doesn't make any sense because there are resources involved and just insurmountable challenges all throughout the state with different libraries. And luckily it did fail, but 170 Republicans thought this was a good idea. But thankfully that bill did fail. Another important bill that came to us was House Bill 1269. This was in regards to the restraint and seclusion of students in schools. There are at times, and thankfully it's very rare, that certain students who have extreme behavioral issues have got to be restrained and secluded for their safety and for the safety of others. But this bill would require video and audio taping of such instances if students had them in their IEP plans, right? Their individual educational plans. And for me, I thought this was a problem because students with IEPs are mainstreamed. And basically it would mean that every single classroom and every single school in the state would have to be equipped with surveillance. And it doesn't solve the underlying problem, which basically is how educators are managing children with these challenges. So I recommended interim study. To be honest with you, the testimony from some parents, it was heartbreaking. They submitted photographs of their children showing bruises that they had and so forth. And, it's not that teachers are abusing kids, but they're just not managing it appropriately. So we're going to interim study that. I'm looking at a law in Maine that emphasizes other types of interventions, teacher training, maybe having behavioral specialists in the schools. I think that's a lot better than just, spying on kids and having cameras throughout the buildings. And last but not least, I know Senator Fenton and you, Matt, made reference to the Divisive Concepts House Bill 1162, which, I was the prime sponsor for, and we've talked about that. But the one part of the law that really gets me is that clause that talks about no pupil in any public school shall be taught that an individual or group is inherently racist, sexist, or oppressive, when we absolutely know that racism exists. And to deny the existence of racism, I believe it's insidious. And to codify this into law is just reprehensible. So I was really thrilled that the courts did overturn that law, citing that it was vague, ambiguous, and it violated the First Amendment rights. So we are going to keep a close eye going forward on that. But thank you very much, Matt. And that's all I have for you folks.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Peter, for your hard work. It's incredible, actually, to look back at, a year and a half of work within each of these committees and just think about, all the attacks against our values as Democrats and all the opportunities that were squandered. But to know that we've got an election ahead of us and an opportunity to turn the tables here and to, start shifting from being on defense to going on offense. So thanks again for all of your hard work in children and family law and on repealing the divisive concepts ban. The final legislative leader we're going to hear from tonight is Representative Wendy Thomas from Merrimack, who was first elected to the House back in 2018 as one of 4 Merrimack water warriors. You may remember them, and they are still working hard doing their work. They were fighting back against Saint-Gobain's PFAS crimes and to hold them accountable. This fight is really personal to Wendy, and along with Representative Nancy Murphy and Representative Rosemary Rung, she's continued the fight this term. And so I'm excited for her recap of Democrats' efforts to address the PFAS crisis in our state, which we all know impacts so many families right here in Hillsborough County. So Wendy, over to you.
Thank you very much, Matt. PFAS, I mean, we're finally getting acknowledgement that PFAS is bad. And so because of that, we have had a fair amount of success with our PFAS bills, although we have come across some roadblocks. So the first one is Nancy Murphy had a tracking pediatric cancer in the cancer registry. That was changed to kidney cancer, which we know is related to PFAS. We also know that pediatric cancers are related, but DES didn't want to put that on the registry because they felt that everybody was going to come forward and put their specific illness or cancer on the registry. So sort of a semi-win on that one. The next one is that Nancy Murphy also put a bill forward that PFAS facilities that measured over 100 parts per trillion were for the land around them would be held liable for remediation costs. And that's huge because right now with Saint-Gobain, they're a French headquartered company. They're leaving Merrimack. There is no plan right now to clean up the site. They're saying that the best thing they can do, because these are forever chemicals, which that's the whole point of trying to clean this up, is that to leave it to degradation. That would take hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years for it to break down. I mean, literally forever. So that one has passed, and we're waiting to see if the governor will sign it. I would say it's 50-50 if the governor signs it. He is against anything that will impact corporate profits, and something like this would definitely impact, he puts profit over people, and that's the difference. We put people over profit. I had a bill that would mandate insurance companies to pay for preventive and monitoring PFAS treatment for people whose blood tests 20 parts per trillion or above, because that's the trigger that the CDC recognizes. It was a little premature because the CDC hasn't adopted the medical guidelines yet. They will, which is why this will be introduced again next term. But what it means is if you have 20 parts per trillion, especially, so let's say a pregnant mother, she has her blood tested, it's above 20 parts per trillion. That would mean that her baby would be tested. If her baby tests above it, then the baby automatically gets kicked into monitoring phases where, believe it or not, with PFAS, if you've been exposed to PFAS, you have to get your cholesterol checked at age 1. And the male children, they have to have their prostates checked, starting very early in, early teens, as opposed to waiting till they're older. So these are all preventive actions that should be covered by insurance companies. I put in a bill to have PFAS mentioned. Well, originally it was to have PFAS tested for any household that is sold in an area that is contaminated with PFAS, especially if they have a private well, then they have to be notified. I had wanted the actual testing of the water. And the reason this bill came forward is somebody in our town contacted me. They bought a house in Merrimack. No one ever told them there was a water issue. And they didn't know there was a problem with the water in their household until they had a water delivery from St. Gobain in their driveway. And, you know, that's absolutely criminal. That's criminal. There's no way they could protect themselves because they didn't know. So the bill that I put forward, it was watered down a little bit. It's just a sheet now that the buyer and the seller have to sign. It says there's, you know, there could be arsenic in the water, there could be lead in the water, there could be PFAS in the water, but at least it's a step forward. Karen Ebel had her bill, which is really exciting. Some products that intentionally add PFAS will be banned in New Hampshire. Again, sort of a semi-win. It was watered down a little bit. They took out some of the products that we had wanted. We had wanted a lot more. And at the last minute, the Senate changed the definition of PFAS, which made it a little weaker. And we're not consistent with the surrounding states, but that's okay. We can change that next term. The landfill bills in general mostly went down in flames. And the significance of landfills to PFAS is that PFAS containing products go into landfills and then they degrade and you get leachate that is toxic, really, really bad. So I've been working with Nick Germana about the landfill bills in particular. And there's one bill that's going to be heard tomorrow. They're working on it in interim study. It's my bill that would require DES to consider public benefit and communicate a community impact for a landfill permit, because, you know, DES should be doing this for all permits. And this arose because they authorized the air permit for St. Gobain, knowing that St. Gobain had contaminated our town and continued to contaminate our town. But we went to a meeting and DES said, well, we're not a protective agency, we're a regulatory agency. So if they fill out the permit correctly, they get the permit application correctly, they get the permit. So, I mean, that's just crazy. That's insane. So this is just a nibble. So, and there's a chance it could pass. The chair of that committee seemed to be interested in it. But this is what we have to do in New Hampshire. We can't just sort of fix everything at once. We have to do, you know, step by baby steps sometimes. So that's being heard. There's Nancy Murphy put in a bill that passed, which is going to be continuing the PFAS Commission, which has done tremendous work for Southern New Hampshire in particular, for another 5 years. That one is, I'm positive that's going to be signed. And then the last one that we were working on was a House resolution, actually. It wasn't a bill. And it went to President Biden, the President of France, our congressional delegation, federal DOJ, EPA, and New Hampshire DOJ. And it simply asked them to keep their eyes on the closure of St. Gobain and to make sure that they are held responsible for remediation costs. Because in our town, we're terrified that they're going to leave town. They've announced that they're going to close this year. And again, they're French headquartered. They could just book, and then we have to get legal actions against, you know, somebody in France as opposed to somebody in Merrimack. So and they're arguing about the consent decree and all this kind of stuff. So we just wanted to have federal oversight, you know, just eyes on this project because it's so important to our town. And I was able to give resolution to President Biden. I saw him in Goffstown. So that was very exciting to do that. So we actually have had a fair amount of success. And a lot of it is because recently the EPA just announced that PFAS chemicals are carcinogenic. They will make you sick. And here's the thing, PFAS doesn't care what political party you belong to. It will make a Democrat as sick as a Republican. And I think that the Republicans are finally starting to understand that. I cannot tell you, those of us in Merrimack that have been working on this since 2016, when we did the research and we knew this stuff was bad, we have been called every name in the book. We have been called fearmongers. We have been called hysterical women. Of course, we've been called that. We have been, threatened. We have everything you can imagine, but we persisted. And we kept at it, and we are finally seeing a little bit of the turning of the tide. There's so much more to do, and we're here for the long haul. This summer, I'm going to be meeting with legislators from surrounding states. I met them at a PFAS conference, and we're trying to establish PFAS legislation that we can share with all of the states, so that we're all linking arms and we're all on the same page. So there's a lot of work that we've done. There's a lot of work still to do. I'm very worried about, the focus has always been on Merrimack, but, PFAS spreads, air blows and water flows. So, if you don't have PFAS in your town right now, that's probably because they haven't tested for it. And there's a threat that it's coming your way. So that's all I have for the PFAS information. I know they had said something about the cannabis. It does look like we're going to get a legal program for recreational. I got to tell you, I'm not very happy with it, but that's, it's one of those things. We got to get it over the finish line, and we can make changes to it next term. That's what from what I've heard in the committee of conference, there was an issue with the ATCs, which are the alternative treatment centers, which are dispensaries. They were not giving preference for these licenses that are going to be available. And now they are going to be given some preference. There was an issue with charges. If I'm driving and a passenger in my car eats an edible, that passenger could be arrested, that's crazy. And the biggest thing is it's still staying with the alcohol division, which that's probably my biggest hang up with this is that I would love to see small mom and pop sort of like the way we have craft breweries in New Hampshire. I would love to see that for cannabis, but we're not there yet. And then on the therapeutic side, what's very exciting is that I've joined hands, or linked arms actually, with Suzanne Vale and Heath Howard, and we've created sort of this mini therapeutic cannabis caucus, and we're doing all we can to protect that program for the patients who use cannabis as medication. My homegrown bill, I've presented it twice. It went down in flames both times, although it was well received. It did pass the House. So, that's not just sort of a fun, let's grow cannabis. That's, giving patients a break on financial responsibilities and, and getting specific strains that help them. So I will be introducing home grow again next term. Well, we're going to keep at it. So that's it for me.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Wendy. And looks like we've got a question here from Katie Cutchell, who asks, is Saint-Gobain in North America a separate legal entity? Can they leave and declare bankruptcy to protect themselves?
So Saint-Gobain, like many big corporations, has created divisions. So this is the air division, or the plastics division, not the air division. So the plastics division, yes, could declare bankruptcy. We, in initial talks with DES, that did come up. It's not coming up as much anymore because they're saying that they want to now move to Ireland to set up a factory there. You can't do that if you're bankrupt. But the other thing is with Saint-Gobain, the town of Merrimack has not been involved in any of the closure discussions. We've asked DES again and again and again, and we have been locked out. So we have no idea what's going on. We have no idea how they're going to clean the land. We have no idea how they're going to dispose of this contaminated equipment. We just don't know, which is why we need federal oversight. We need help.
Great. Well, we know you're going to continue to keep an eye on it and keep us posted on what we can do to be helpful as the fight goes on. So thank you again for your leadership, Wendy. Thank you to all of my legislative colleagues for sharing what you've been working on. And honestly, it's just like this much of what everybody's been working on. So look forward to seeing everybody out on the campaign trail this summer and fall. If you've got specific questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to any legislator, whether they're on this call or not. And make sure that our folks get reelected and that our incredible new candidates or folks who have run in the past and are running again, please make sure that you're doing what you can to support them in your neck of the woods to make sure that we have majorities in both the House and the Senate and a Democratic governor so that we can undo all the damage that's been done, or at least some of it, over the last 8 years. So with that, gonna kick things back over to Dave Trumbull, who, if you were late in joining us, you all should know Dave's running for state Senate. We got to make sure that we do what we can to support him to knock those doors and get out the vote. But Dave, back to you. Let us know what's going on in Hillsborough County the rest of the summer.
Oh, well, thank you very much, Representative Wilhelm. A couple of thank yous and then a couple of calendar notes. Thank you first to all of you, the speakers tonight, for your service to the state and for coming tonight and all the information you gave us. Also, I want to thank to the Hillsborough County Democrats Executive Committee for putting this event together. That's Dick Bruno, Pat Teeden, Kermit Williams, Eric Rasmussen, Tom Burgess, John Zavgren, Shane Potvin, Matthew Hale, Marjorie Porter, and Carol Schreck. And of course, our leaders, Bev Cotton and Katie Kutzall, who are a force. So thank you. And obviously, thank you to everybody for coming tonight and being part of this. So if you have your calendars handy, we have two events we wanted to highlight. First is Wednesday, June 26th at 6:30. We're having a strawberry shortcake social, and that's in Bedford at the Bedford Library in the McAllister Room. That's from 6:30 to 8:15 p.m. And that is a special event for county candidates, and that's being put on by the Hillsborough County Dems, the Manchester Dems, and the Nashua Dems. So this is a special event for those candidates that are in that special category of county offices. And then also, please mark on your calendar Sunday, September the 22nd. That's the Hillsborough County Dems picnic out at Oak Park in Greenfield. We're going to have a lot of great speakers. And this year, we're actually having some live music to try and bring some lighthearted entertainment to get the day started. So I think that's all there is for me. And thank you all. And if maybe back to Bev or Katie for final words.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you all. This is just, it does my heart good to listen to you all. I just feel that we are so fortunate to have such wonderful representation from the Senate side and from the House side. It's more and more critically important in these times. It does my heart good to hear you tonight and to hear of your accomplishments in a very difficult environment. So I very much appreciate that. The leadership here is fantastic. So without further ado, I'm going to let you get back to what's left of your Sunday. And thank you again very, very much for all you do for this wonderful state. Thank you.